I'm Aaron Sagers, and this is Talking Strange. Hey there, spooky nerds, and welcome to Talking Strange, the paranormal pop culture show with Den of Geek. I'm your host, journalist, author, researcher of weird things, Aaron Sagers. You can also catch me on 28 Days Haunted on Netflix and Paranormal Caught on Camera on Travel Channel and the Max streaming service and Discovery Plus. And we are currently filming our 7th season, so very excited about that, obviously. And today we're talking about UFOs over West Michigan. And I'm going to start with a quote that is been repeated a lot about this particular case. And it is simply, I got UFOs in my backyard. And that's what eyewitness Cindy Pravda of Grand Haven, Michigan said to a friend while she was talking on the phone on March 8th, 1994. But there's a couple other quotes that are perhaps less famously associated with this case, but are very notable. And they include, quote, yeah, there's something big down there. That's really strange. Is moving towards the west-southwest. Looks like a big blob. I've never seen anything like this. Not even when I'm doing storms. These aren't storms. And that quote is attributed to one of my guests today, because on the night of March 8th, 1994, according to the Chicago Tribune, more than 300 people in 42 counties saw something, a series of somethings over Lake Michigan. And we're going to be talking about that today on the close to the 30th anniversary of that event. My guests, first off, become a buddy of mine. Happy to call him a colleague. I see him at a lot of events. Bill Konkolesky, state director of the Michigan chapter of the Mutual UFO Network since 2004. He joined the organization in 1993 after reporting some of his own personal UFO encounters, and now, along with his MUFON responsibilities, he also does frequent public presentations on the phenomena and has contributed to numerous UFO-related books and television productions. He's also the author of Experiencer, Raised in Two Worlds, and also Experiencer 2, and he returns to the Talking Strange show for a second time, I believe. And also joining is Jack Bushong. Now, he grew up in Muskegon, Michigan, and knew from an early age that he wanted to be a meteorologist. Having always been interested in the weather, astronomy, and science, he received a bachelor's degree in meteorology from Florida State University, go Noles, in 1988. And he was 29 years old when he was working at the National Weather Service in Muskegon on the night of this dramatic UFO event that he tracked on radar. And shortly after the event, he moved to Georgia and became a hydro-meteorologist. He retired in 2016 after an illustrious career with numerous awards and promotions. And now, after a long bout of silence, wants to share what happened on the night of March 8th, 1994. So let's get to it. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have you back. Bill and Jack, it's a real honor to have you on here. I know I've been talking to Bill for a long time saying we gotta get Jack on the show. So I'm glad that we're doing this. Gentlemen, I mean, Bill, actually, why don't we start with you, and why don't you just sort of set up this story and give us the bare bones of this sighting, this very large kind of mass sighting that took place 30 years ago.
Okay, so it was the tail end of winter of 1994, and the night of March 8th was the peak of a small wave, meaning small in number of days of sightings. But on March 8th, the lid really blew off, and it was a major event. And it had over, as you mentioned, 300 witnesses across 42 counties. It was on the southwest side of the state of Michigan, where the major city of Grand Rapids is, as well as Grand Haven, Muskegon, Holland, and the sighting started right after the sun went down, and it was early evening, and people were seeing strange lights. Now, what people were seeing when they were seeing them at a distance were solid colored lights. It would be a solid colored blue or green or yellow. This is most of what MUFON was getting in, doing wild erratic maneuvers, snapping in and out of formation. And people who were seeing something closer than that, we're generally seeing very large craft, silvery, metallic, with multicolored lights all the way around it. And people were calling 911 about their sightings. Now, if you think about it, I've been doing this UFO thing for a long time. Most people don't share their sighting with anybody except maybe family member, friend, or spouse, whatever. And to even reach out and tell somebody at all about that they saw a UFO is a big step. And talk about a really big step is to call the number that you call when somebody's trying to break into your home or you had a heart attack. Call 911. There were over 60 calls to the area 911 reporting UFOs in the sky. So these people were very affected by the sightings that they had. It caused them to rush out and contact the police directly. There are several witnesses, including Cindy Pravda, whom you mentioned, who's still very much getting the word out about that particular event. And I can go through a little more of the evening, or I don't know if you just wanted the basic setup, because I can go into the Graves family and Officer Jeff Feldhaus.
Yes, I do. I'd like to hear more
Okay.
about those eyewitness accounts, but Bill, this was a year, about a year less than from when you started with
Mhm.
MUFON. I guess where were you at this point? Did you see anything in the sky, you personally? Not that I'm
I,
trying to pin it on you. No, that wasn't an
it
interrogation question, but
was me.
where were you at?
It was me. I had cellophane up and I had a flashlight. Um, I had actually joined in the fall of '93. I'm on the east side of the state in the Detroit area. And this was within 6 months of me becoming a member. And I was not nearly trained to be a field investigator. I was just fresh and bright-eyed into the organization, very excitedly hearing the next tidbit about that particular evening. And frankly, it's funny you bring it up. I thought, oh my gosh, is it always going to be like this? Is it always going to be this exciting? And that was about the most exciting thing that's happened since that time. But uh, yeah, so I wasn't boots on the ground. I was just getting it directly from people who were investigating it and very excitedly thinking, what a ride I'm going to be on. And it has been an exciting ride,
Yeah.
apart from a big event like this. But yeah, I didn't make it over for it.
Well, I want to bring Jack in, but before I do, Bill, connect the dots, create the bridge from these eyewitness accounts, 911, and then the entry point to Jack.
Sure. So, with all these calls coming in and all these sightings, the police were starting to realize that something strange was going on that wasn't easy to explain, but they weren't seeing it themselves until the Graves family, a family of four in the Holland area, called and said that they were witnessing a UFO across the street that was still there. Big silver disc, all the colored lights around it, mother, father, son, and daughter. And since it was still there, amazingly, the police dispatched an officer to go investigate, and that was Officer Jeff Feldhaus. And he went to their home and he witnessed it as well. In fact, he brought out a pair of binoculars and saw a second one off in the distance, much like the one that they were very close to. So now the police have their own, they have an officer of their own actually witnessing this along with a family of four, and they were looking for additional verification about what was going on. From what I hear, they tried to contact the airport, local airport in Grand Rapids. They were not able to get a hold of anybody and looked to anywhere where anybody had any sort of radar, and they reached out to Muskegon's National Weather Service and got a hold of Jack.
Jack, talk about your entry point into this and what you recall. Like, walk us through that initial phone call, what you remember about it, and then what you started seeing.
Okay. It was, I think it was about 9 o'clock or so, maybe 9:30. And when I got a call, I was completely cold. They just said that they had reports of lights in the sky. And one thing that I'm interested in that you didn't mention, besides weather, is aircraft. I flew a lot when I was a kid because my mom lived in Florida, my dad lived in Michigan, so I was constantly flying between Michigan and Florida, and I always had to go through O'Hare Airport, which was amazing. They had an observation deck, and I just would go up there and take pictures of the aircraft when I was a little kid, like anywhere from I started when I was 4 years old, all the as an unaccompanied minor, all the way up to 18 years old doing this. And so I was very interested in aircraft, and so I always had my eyes in the sky, either due to weather or due to aircraft. And I tell you, everything I saw in the sky, and even to this day, I could explain as aircraft, really. So me myself, even though I've looked all my life, I have never seen anything I couldn't explain, and it's too bad. I would like to see something, but anyway, I came in and I never really had it in the back of my mind as UFOs coming into this, because even though I was interested in astronomy, really, I wasn't really a UFO buff at that point. There was a coworker that was, and even my boss in the station, he's now deceased, was a UFO buff, which was really kind of interesting because the way he took it after the event, he was really trying to poo-poo it, even though he was a big UFO buff to begin with, and that kind of made me a little perturbed a little bit. But anyway, so I was pretty cold into this, and because I was so interested in aircraft and I'm learning on the radar, I'm not quite, I'm beyond training, but I'm still trying to get in the really heat of the moment, severe weather. I have to go in there and really know the radar really quickly because everything is just fast. Get a warning out within, look on the radar and get a warning out within a minute if you have severe weather, and you got to do things in the dark and all that. So I was used to doing that. I had practice looking, what better way to try to manipulate the radar than to chase aircraft. And I always knew that if I would look for aircraft on the radar, and because it's just all it is it's not like a FAA radar where you have a big scan of the whole sky in one swoop. I'm just looking at like a flashlight in the say you're looking for a fly, that's flying around the room, and you're trying to spot it with a flashlight, and that's kind of like what I was trying to do. So it's basically cone shape that goes out, and the radar beam gets bigger and bigger as it goes out, and so I'm basically doing a sweep side to side, going back. Instead of letting it go around, I took it off the automatic rotation. I have two cranks to be able to go side to side to paint the any objects, and then also go up little by little, kind of just going, kind of back and forth as I rose. And finally, I found something, and it looked like an aircraft. It was probably the nearest aircraft to the radar that I had ever seen. And it moved like an aircraft at first, and it was right in the location where Officer Velthouse said, and the dispatcher. I was talking to the dispatcher who was on the radio with Officer Velthouse at the time. So it was in the location that they were saying, and I said, well, there is a something there, and it's moving like an aircraft. It was moving to the west southwest. And then after about 30 seconds, it just stopped and hovered. That's when it started getting interesting. And it was up at about, I can't remember exactly, maybe 5 to 12,000 feet, somewhere in that medium to higher range place, higher than, like, for instance, a Cessna or something like that. And actually, you wouldn't see a helicopter at night hovering that high up either. No reason to. And it definitely was going faster than, for instance, a balloon, and you wouldn't have hot air balloons at night anyway, especially in the winter like that. So I knew it was something, but when it stopped and hovered, That that was a little strange, but then all of a sudden it just went out and, I just started seeing multiple returns. It just kind of snapped out, it started acting crazy. It didn't move like a gentle aircraft anymore. It started moving erratically, like a hover, zoom, hover, and so on. And basically it would pop to its location, stop for a few seconds, maybe 30 seconds, and then move again. And it would do it in a right angle. So it would go out 20 miles, then it would switch directions, go out another 20 miles in a different direction, all kind of going towards the southwest, but it would go west and then a little south and then a little west or southwest and so on. And so that's when I got really excited, especially when it became perfectly aligned with the radar beam. So I had my radar beam, and that's at this point, it was boom, 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 radar, object, 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 all in the beam, all lined up perfectly with my radar. And then it disappeared. And then I could go up and down, of course. I had another scope where I could see the vertical structure of it. And it was making a triangular shape in the vertical, like it was vertical triangle. And it was like that. That's when I said, oh my God, what is this? Not only is it lined up with the radar, but it's making a formation. And when I was trying to, tell the dispatcher what level it was at, 12,000 feet, 16,000 feet or so, it it moved again before I could finish. And then it went from that vertical triangle to a triangle that was horizontal. It snapped this way and then split out 20 miles apart from each other. So it was really kind of close, within about maybe 2 miles of each other in altitude and distance. And then all of a sudden they were all at the same altitude, but they were in a triangular formation 20 miles apart. And they kind of stayed at that always at 20 miles apart formation. But they would also jump 20 miles. So they would jump 20 miles. And then the other two, the first one that I saw, the main one that was close to the radar, that was the biggest, would jump 20 miles or so out towards Lake Michigan. And then the other two would follow it. So I would see boom, and then it was not a triangle anymore. And then all of a sudden the other two would come in and form a triangle again. And that would be over Lake Michigan. And it kept doing that, snapping back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. In the meantime, I didn't know that there was that many people that had seen it. I heard there were, well, I guess maybe he did say there were dozens of calls, but they didn't really describe the movement. But that's when he said that the objects were flying apart and coming back together again. And that's what I saw on radar. They were flying apart, coming back together, flying apart, coming back. So what I was at that point, I knew what I was seeing on radar, people were seeing on the ground, and that really sparked my interest, and that's how it started out.
Well, let me ask, just kind of like a slight aside, kind of
Sure,
backtracking a little bit. I don't want to
sure.
necessarily get too in the weeds with how radars work, because I am already outside of my depth, way outside of my depth.
Okay.
But I've read a lot about sort of your manual control of this radar, and you mentioned, using these two cranks and using this as a bit of a spotlight. Was that standard operating procedure for meteorologists, or is that something that, because you were already a fan of aircraft and you liked kind of keeping an eye on everything, that was something somewhat special to you and your interests?
Both. It was both special to me and my interest with aircraft. So I'm glad that it happened to me and not somebody else, because I don't know if any of the other guys, there were 5 guys that rotated on shift. I don't know if the other guys, they were older, all Vietnam vets, and I don't think they would have gotten excited about it like I did. But the thing is too, is that yes, we during severe weather, during when we're looking at thunderstorms, We did take it off the automatic rotation mode, and we would look at the three-dimensional structure of a thunderstorm. So that's how you had to learn how to operate it manually, where you would kind of look at the storm, and then you would kind of paint it in the vertical, because you want to see the vertical structure. You want to see how tall the thunderstorm got. And because that the basically, in a nutshell, the more developed a thunderstorm is in altitude, the stronger the thunderstorm is. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was both really, and but yeah, going in the manual mode was not a rare thing to do at all.
It still sounds, I just kind of like those little uh, serendipitous moments in these situations where you, as a guy that was already kind of fascinated with aircraft, that you were at the wheel, so to speak.
I know. Isn't that interesting?
It
Yeah,
is.
it was
It's
very.
you.
I'm glad it happened to me. Any other guy, in fact, when the other guy came in and I showed it to him, he was just like, whatever. And he saw it, and then he saw him moving. I don't know what was going through his head, but he just was very nonchalant about it.
And you, correct me if I'm wrong. Did you say that altitudes? I know that altitudes were kind of shifting. Was
Yeah.
did it get up to 60,000 that you believe?
Yes, it did. It did.
That's a hell of
That's a
an
big
altitude,
jump.
it seems to me.
Yeah, yeah, I learned about helicopters too, is you can't have a helicopter, if a helicopter is going to get up to 60,000 feet, it has to be moving forward at a pretty good clip, if they can even get up that high. But at their ceiling level, you have to be moving. Helicopters, the higher helicopters get, the less likely they're able to hover and stay aloft. They have to have some kind of lift underneath the blades in the forward rotate, because the air is so thin up there, and so to hover up at that height, um, well, you would think it could be a balloon, but the thing is they were moving, they were moving in such high speed, and just like that. And there was I didn't see an acceleration. I just saw, bam, it was just, and then stop on a dime, just as if I could imagine, if I was on the ground, saw it, it would look like a streak of light going just, and then stopping 20 miles away at a distance.
Did
So
it, could you anticipate, could you estimate the speed that it would take for this thing to do this kind of snapback movement? You
yeah,
know,
I did. It took me a while to, I was a little conservative when I just said 10 miles in 10 seconds, because I knew I had to look for it again. But when I think about the one time that I actually did see it between sweeps, I'm probably doing it like a clock, like tick tock, with the radar going boom, 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 boom. You don't want to go really fast. You might break the pedestal of the radar, but it was about a second each, and so it would be from one spot to 20 miles away within one sweep, which I would estimate is about a second. So to move 20 miles in a second, that's pretty intense. And I only saw it do that once. The other times it took me, a few seconds to find it again. But there was that one time when I did see it here in one sweep, and then all of a sudden I'm over here and it's there, and I come back and it's not there, but it's over here, and that was about 1 second.
yeah.
So that's incredible to um the acceleration on that, and the speed is intense.
Meanwhile,
Was I'm sorry, Jack, was I right that you may have estimated at one point it was 72,000 miles an hour?
Yeah, 20 miles in 1 second is about 76. Well, it would be 60 times. Yeah, let's see how that, well, one second, 20 miles. So if you think about 10 miles in 1 second, that means that it's going, Well, it came out, the math came out to about 70 some thousand miles an hour.
So,
That's
Bill,
amazing.
I mean, yeah, it's astounding.
Especially in within the atmosphere. The only thing that goes that fast outside is outside the atmosphere, and that would be a spacecraft that's on its way to another planet.
Yeah.
Um,
So, Bill, this is happening. We've got the National Weather Service. We're tracking this thing. We're seeing this sort of triangular formation. We're seeing this rubber band snapback motion taking place. At times, we're seeing a straight line formation. So, this is happening with Jack and Jack's center. Meanwhile, on the ground, we have people that started out calling this in. Maybe they saw this thing, looking out at their barn, seeing it in the sky above. And then we're getting a lot of phone calls coming in. What else? How does what Jack is experiencing matching up with what the ground reports are, and what kind of happens next in this story?
Well, one big detail was when the UFO started to move away from the Graves home, and Officer Veldhaus, he hopped in his car to pursue it. At one point, it disappeared, and that did correlate with one of the jumps that Jack had mentioned. And so for Veldhaus, it just simply disappeared. It vanished in the sky. He saw no sense of movement. It just tore off that way. Now, there's a story, and it may even be something that you're alluding to that I actually myself just learned very recently. There were a couple of campers out on the beach. Now, mind you, this is this is winter in Michigan on the side that's got the lake effect, so it's very cold. And why these people were out camping on the beach that's a strange enough story as you could get anyway. But so the story goes, according to one of our field investigators, Virginia Tilley, that they saw a UFO, a disc, out over the lake and a part where there was water. Now, keep in mind, most of Lake Michigan was frozen at this point, except
Yep.
for a patch at the very southern end. And they saw a disc. It looked like it was hoovering up water, sucking up water out of the lake.
Yeah.
And along with what they saw, they apparently saw some sort of man in black type character. That's their story. Looking at them, observing them, and that frightened them even more. Now, the reason that this story took a while, one of the things about being in MUFON and just the paranormal investigation field, I think, just broadly, is that a lot of people that are in this field are very entrepreneurial. They have their projects, they have their books, they have their podcasts, they have their special interests where they'll go out on investigation, either as part of a group or by themselves. So Virginia actually took this moment in her time with MUFON to sort of start her own group, her own investigative group. And she never really ultimately rejoined MUFON. I never met her. I never heard her story. I never heard anybody else tell her story. And then when the recent production happened with Unsolved Mysteries, she shared that. And now that's the question I get all the time about this event was that particular moment on the beach that that couple saw that UFO. Now, this is part of Jack's story too, that when the UFOs took off from the land, they congregated, and this is what he had seen. And pardon, correct me if I'm getting it wrong. There were what, dozens of craft that
Dozens, absolute dozens. Yeah. Yeah. And since it was further away from the radar and closer to Chicago, they were small, but they were, there because it was further away, but there were dozens of them. And most of them were hovering, but a couple of them I could see actually kind of meandering around between them, which was really weird. And this would be a three-dimensional, a blob of, objects.
Is
Yeah.
it in your opinion now, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong on this. I've read that some people as far away as 200 miles from this were reporting seeing something in the sky. Actually, Jack, did you ever go outside and just look up yourself and see, hey, can I see anything out there?
I did, but because there's so many trees in the direction I wanted to go to, I did kind of almost walked out to the runway a little bit, but I couldn't see anything. But when I came back, I called. We have a hotline where you just pick up the phone. You're on the phone with the FAA tower, control tower. And I asked the guy, he was by himself on the ship at that hour, and I said, "Did you see anything strange? We've been getting some reports of UFOs down in South Haven." And he said, "Well, I didn't see anything on radar." And I'm thinking, and I said, "I wonder why I get it on my radar but not yours." But I know the FAA they have to use transponders, at least in that point, where if the aircraft, they need a transponder on there to actually relay their altitude and the flight number and all that. But he said he didn't see on his radar, but he saw what he saw was three aircraft in formation down there. So he saw it visibly from his tower that's a couple 100 feet high. And which is interesting that an FAA guy would actually admit that, because when I tried to get more about that, the FAA was very tight-lipped, and they all are tight-lipped. I had a little stint in with the aircraft, or with the FAA where I worked just for about 30 days, for some new stuff, and they were really, they're basically, the boss said, and I'm not letting it, I'm not saying anything that's not secret, but before he opened the door to the room where all the air traffic controllers are, he said, "Anything that you see or hear in here, you're not allowed to bring outside this room." That's what he said. So I know the FAA is very, very tight-lipped about stuff like that. You're never going to get anything from the FAA. Never. That's what I learned. Yeah. So,
Bill,
and,
oh, go on.
oh, I was going to say, and case in point is, well, the O'Hare incident, where there was a disc just above the airport, and you hear the telephone conversation where the guy wouldn't believe one of the United Airlines representatives that there was something above this one terminal, and he said he laughed about it, but then he said, "Even if I saw something, I wouldn't tell you." And so, and that is true, they're going to either laugh about it or they're going to, blow it off.
That's
And
and to clarify, that's a separate incident. That's not
that's a
this
separate
incident.
incident.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
And it reminds me again of the Japanese Airlines thing in Alaska. That was a very similar thing. That was very,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, as far as the just kind of keeping with the narrative for another moment, Bill,
Yep.
this is when you kind of create a timeline of all of these sightings, the phone calls, what Jack's experiencing and tracking. Are we looking at how long total were these things being seen out there?
My recall has the earliest report somewhere in the 5 to 6 p.m. hour. And really, Jack said, I think he said that you were seeing up till like 2 a.m. or something like that. Is that
Yeah, I
correct,
was
Jack?
watching until 2 a.m. And if you excuse me, I should have gotten this earlier, but there is a since I've been on Unsolved Mysteries, there have been a lot of people that have been writing me in, and this fellow has sent me a message stating that he was a pilot, and evidently FAA air traffic control in Chicago did know about this going on, according to this fellow, because he said he was a pilot. Both pilots saw it, but they actually told him as he was coming in from the east to the west, going over Lake Michigan, which was pretty close to where that hive, or whatever you call it, that swarm of UFOs were. He was asked, "Do you see anything at your 3 o'clock?" And he specifically said, he looked over there, and yeah, he said he saw all these. He did see it. He saw it with his own eyes. Same thing that what I saw on radar. And so I'll send you a copy of this message and take off some names, but but he was a pilot, and there was another pilot that saw it too, that was on the radio at the same time. The air traffic controller specifically asked pilots, "Do you see anything to the north of you?" And they did say yes, and the pilot, they did see it. They affirmed it.
This was
Affirmed it.
the cargo pilot that reached out to you after the Unsolved Mysteries episode aired
I
in
think
2022.
it may have been a cargo pilot. Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess you already heard about this guy. Yeah.
Yeah, please, but please send that along. I mean, I've
Sure, I
just
will.
through
Yeah.
my own readings, I've heard a little bit about that. But
Right.
so, Bill, with if this thing is kind of activity is taking place for several hours, it's just so peculiar to me that we're also not hearing about some sort of military being scrambled in the area. Has there been anything to that to speak to
I
that?
haven't heard anything related to a military presence or the military visiting people who had reported anything. Nothing along those lines at all. The question I actually thought you were going to ask is, where's the photos and videos if it was a several hour event? And they do exist. I have pictures and videos from at least two different witnesses. And for the picture, it's an all black screen, all black, and you see a tiny white dot in it. For the video, it's all black with a jiggly white dot in it. And you don't know if the light is moving or if the person just can't hold the camera straight.
Right.
They're essentially worthless.
Yeah.
And there's no even guarantee it was at night. It could have been just somebody like, haha, I'm gonna take a picture of the street light and send it in. Really, nothing further could be confirmed from it.
Yeah. It is.
And then,
Oh, go on.
mhm. Oh, yeah, I was going to slightly change the topic to something that happened after March 8th.
Please.
Okay, so a kind of a humorous follow-up. It becomes humorous at the end. Uh, Dr. Michael Swords, who was representing CUFOS, the Center for UFO Studies at the time, this is J. Allen Hynek's group that he founded after Project Blue Book folded, and based out of Chicago. Group made mostly up of PhDs looking into the phenomena. Small group, very scientifically minded. And so Dr. Michael Swords was out of Kalamazoo, and they asked him to investigate. So one of the places he went to the National Weather Service, and he interviewed Jack, and they did a series of sketches together for the event. Did they not have the radar data? Is that any longer?
It was not too long after the event. I mean, my supervisor and his supervisor gave the approval to talk to this guy since he was a scientist and he was from a local university. And so he was the only one that officially we had the soon after the fact interview. And so but I had already made sketches on my maps that you all it's been on TV, you see it. He actually so I showed him the maps. He actually copied what I was showing. So but I had but everything I showed, and I believe I have the tape for that interview. So I went through through our conversation, so I could say, and I would play the tape and then turn it off and say, okay, this is where it is right at this point, and then and then start up and do it. And so we had a meeting for about 2 hours. And then I went to take him to the radar, and I actually said, yes, you can. I want you to know that you can see aircraft with this radar, and I'm going to show you. And I went ahead and looked for an aircraft flying, and showed him an airplane flying, and obviously flying. You can see its movement and see what. And I showed him what it looks like on the radar, what kind of signature it shows. I'm up quite a bit in altitude, so I'm not getting any kind of a bounce that some what we call anomalous propagation, or where you see ground clutter, so he could see it. He could see what it looked like on the radar. He could see on what we have is called the amplitude scope, and that shows the strength of the object, of how much radar energy that's echoing off the object. And it spiked, just like just like the UFO did, showing that it was an aircraft, because it's a solid, shiny, metallic object that you can, that would have a big spike all the way to the top, and showing an enormous amount of power coming back. Even if I pointed it at a building, I wouldn't get a spike that way, because it's made out of concrete and has a bunch of other kind of angles and all that to it. So it shows. So when I had a spike like that, I'm pointing at a hard, shiny surface metallic object. And that's what it looked like when I was looking at the UFOs, just like an aircraft. It had the same signature as an aircraft, but it was just moving at extreme high speeds and very erratically. So it was still, and as I said, it was still a flying tin can. It was just moving at very erratic and enormous speeds with really big time acceleration and inertia.
Well, and I want you to just to kind of define a little bit more, briefly, this notion of ground clutter, this anomalous propagation, because my understanding is that it's like basically ground clutter. There's
Yeah.
crap on the ground that sometimes the radar, depending on the conditions, is going to pick it up, and it's on the ground, but it's reading as if it's in the sky. But and that's such a layman's definition of it. But tell me why you're certain it was not that.
Okay. That when you're seeing ground clutter, you're going to see it painted in a big area, kind of a blob, and you might see some, some hard and some high and soft values, but it's also going to be close. And of course, it's going to be when I have the radar leveled, closer to the ground at about a half a degree. The, the way that we are trained to be able to get to keep the radar from having that amount of ground clutter, so that we could see if there's rain there, because basically, if you know what rain looks like on the radar, that's what the ground clutter looks like. So there's a big difference with what it looks like, number one, because it looks like rain is the ground clutter, but it doesn't look like aircraft. It doesn't look like one pinpoint. You can't, with ground clutter, you don't get just one pinpoint. You get a whole array of junk. And not only that, but I had the radar going 10 times the level that normally it is at. And the higher you go up, you get rid of that ground clutter. So I'm going up with the radar beam up higher off the ground. So I'm not going to get that ground clutter. I'm going to penetrate any inversion layer that's going to be able, because it's just like a mirage. When you look at, for instance, a mirage or something, like even if you've noticed it, like let's say, for instance, you're on the ocean or the lake and you're at a shallow angle and you're looking at the reflection off the lake, you're going to see a reflection there. But if you actually go deeper, then that's when you can see it down into the surface. You don't have that reflection anymore. So it's the same thing above here. At a shallow angle, you are going to reflect off an inversion layer. But if you go higher up, and you're going to penetrate it. And so that's why we're told that if we want to see where rain is, we have to go up higher with the radar, and we can and then we can get rid of all the ground clutter. So
Yeah.
because I was seeing it 60,000 feet, you don't get ground clutter at 60,000 feet, And so so anybody that says that, wow, it's just ground clutter. Number one, ground clutter doesn't move. Number two, it didn't look like ground clutter. Number three, I had the radar manipulated to where I wouldn't see ground clutter. So,
And I appreciate you defining ground clutter in a way that, for the most part, I understood. So I appreciate that.
It's not an easy thing to describe.
Bill, you've got a lot of people calling into 911. A lot of people reporting sightings. You have cops involved in this. You've got a meteorologist. You have respected people that are all kind of forming this story outside of actual debris or wreckage from one of these things. Is this pretty close to a I don't want to say perfect, but pretty great accounting of this strange incident?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. If it's okay, I'm gonna finish what I started saying, and then I will totally jump back into that. The humorous part of Dr. Swords coming out to
Oh,
see Jack was that 2 weeks after they did those radar sketches, somebody did a Freedom of Information Act on the National Weather Service and got a copy of those sketches, and that's
Oh,
actually how MUFON ended up getting them.
really?
Who knew that you could do a Freedom of Information Act, a FOIA, on the National Weather Service? But they did, and they got those sketches out of it. So that's pretty
Okay.
funny.
I didn't know that.
But yeah, this was a massive case and one of the biggest. And I really think why it didn't just really stick a better landing was the lack of a single good picture or video of it. With all the many witnesses, people want that part of it. Like if you compare it to the Phoenix Lights, another major event. But I mean, if you talk about how strange this event was versus the Phoenix Lights, I mean, this is arguably a stranger uh, event than that. But no pictures, no videos. The story didn't even really um, make its way into even the broader UFO community, I think, until UFO hunters did something on it. And gosh, when was that? But and it was a
2007.
very small part, and I think that it was forgotten again, and it wasn't until Unsolved Mysteries did this bang up job of putting it all together and putting it out there that it really made it onto the map. And for me, I mean, this is a very important event. I started MUFON and this happened. And to me, this is, one of the best things of being in the UFO field during my time in it. And yet, people just generally kind of shrugged it off. And they're like, okay, show me more. I'm like, well, you can listen to the audio tape of
Mhm.
the people calling into 911. If you go on YouTube, there's still out there. I think it's called Ottawa County UFO. If you look that up, you should be able to hear these people calling in. In fact, you can hear some audio of the dispatch speaking with Jack as well, and a lot of the transcripts of people's 911 calls are out there as well. So tremendous documentation, a great number of witnesses, and a very big deal and a very important part of, I think, UFO history in general. Now, and it begs the question, well, if they bring it, if this is an alien civilization, let's say, and they come down and they have this big beach party in Southwest Michigan one night, how come we're not seeing more of that? What was so special about that night, why there were so many of them being so dramatically open, and having all these witnesses? And part of Jack's story that I'm not sure if everybody caught on specifically, it seemed like the UFOs knew that they were being watched by his radar and reacting to his radar.
Yeah,
Um,
they looked like they were showing off. They really did.
Do, do you
Like, hey,
feel,
look what I
Jack,
could do.
do you feel like this was that you were kind of being, I don't want to say communicated with, but that this was for you as an audience of one or whoever else was manning the radars in different stations?
Immediately I did. When I said, "Oh my God, what is this?" It looked like they were. I mean, you see this one little aircraft moving like an aircraft, and then all of a sudden, boom, it goes right into, like, lined up with my radar. Now, this was I believe, I remember the Gulf War, the first one, to get Iraq out of Kuwait. They were talking about, that aircraft could see when a radar would lock on them. And that's exactly what I did. I wasn't a radar that was just going around and around. All of a sudden, I locked in on them. So I was continually kind of sending electromagnetic radiation of the radar frequency, in their direction. And so they must have known that I was sitting there watching them. And I mean, if it was any kind of advanced technology, they would know that, just like a military aircraft would. And so that's what I feel, is that they knew I was looking at them, and it made me worried because I thought they were going to send some kind of I'm serious. I thought they were going to send an energy pulse back at me, and then the radar console was going to like blow up into sparks and stuff. And I was worried about that. I was thinking, do I need to get my eye goggles or something?
Well,
And but it made it felt I was creeped out. I felt creepy. I felt like I was getting, the hair was going up, on the back of my neck. I was interested and curious, but I was wondering, are they going to do something to my radar? And boy, are they going to be mad at me if they burn the radar out. But because I thought with advanced technology like that, they could. And so I, yeah, I really felt like they knew I was looking at them, but then they were, I kind of wonder, and it reminds, I mean, I never really studied UFOs up until that point, and then I did, and so I was getting to the crop circles, stuff like that. And if these crop circles are real, if you notice, if these are a real thing, phenomena, and they're not hoaxes, then you can see they communicate in geographical, you know, in geometry. They're not geographical, but in geometric formations. They're communicating with geometry. They're doing patterns and formations and stuff like that. And it was like they were kind of, you know, is that how they communicate? By their movements, um, communicate to one another, and to others. You know, it's one of those questions I gotta wonder, they were giving a good show to the people on the ground. They were giving a good show for me. Um, they were showing off, them going really fast at high speeds and then hovering. If they didn't want me to see them, they would have just gone away, in a hurry. But they stuck around for a long time, and it's like they waited for me to catch up to find them again. Then they moved again, then I could find them again. And same with people on the ground. They gave a good show to the people on the ground, going apart, coming together, going up and down, vertically, horizontally. Looked like Christmas tree lights up there. Um, if they didn't want to be seen, they wouldn't have lights on like they did, you know. So,
what strikes me about your story, Jack, is it seems like this profoundly impacted you the way you talk about it. And
yeah, definitely.
I want you to go into that a little bit. I mean, I think you should most certainly talk about it personally and professionally, because for a long time you were not talking, and for a long time your name was not out there as the guy. Um, so talk about, just that profound impact, but also how this kind of turned your world upside down for a while, and then bring us full circle to why you started talking.
Well, when it first happened, I was talking to all my friends and family about it, and the family was interested and they would listen to me. But because my family knows me and they know that I'm always had a scientific, curiosity. Ever since I was a little kid, I was one of 20 questions to my dad. I must have driven him crazy. But um, but anyway, but I noticed that I would say 50% of the people that I talked to about this would just give me that blank look, like, just, I'm sure you've had it too. You talk about it and they give you this blank look like you're crazy. And that was an uncomfortable feeling. And then when they didn't ask me to move to Atlanta. They told me basically, I was told, we were going through modernization and we were closing the Muskegon office. But I really had the sense that when everybody from Muskegon was moving to other offices in Michigan, for instance, either Detroit or Grand Rapids, that I wouldn't be invited to go there, when the office closed. So I knew I had to get out. My supervisor said, Jack, you need to get out of Michigan. And even though I wanted to live there the rest of my life mainly, I was really interested in the weather in Michigan because it's so interesting, and I love snowfall forecasting. I loved snowfall amount forecasting. And look where I am in Atlanta where it doesn't snow, and I'm pretty bummed about it. I was pretty bummed about it. And so I didn't want to move, but I was forced to move. And so it in order to keep my career, and yeah, the other guys and the weather, even if they found out, I mean, some guys would see UFO hunters or something like that and they would make fun of it, but or they would see, on my name on, some stories or something like that regarding this. And yeah, they would make fun of it. So it was really something I didn't want to talk about. And if anybody asked about it, that was a meteorologist or any other professional colleague, I would just kind of say, it was just something that happened, and I've moved on. But when it finally, when the military or the Navy finally started coming out about it and saying it is a big thing, and what I always thought was why they needed to pay attention and talked about it was because it seemed like something that was could be a danger to civilian and other military aircraft, because I mean, man, they're moving at high speeds. They could collide with something. And I always thought that. And I understand why, when you got these things in the air, why aren't you worried about this? And I just couldn't understand it. To me, it was like something that was real. It was there. To me, it was like, no, I went through all the steps of, could it be this? Could it be that? Could it be that? And I ran out of possibilities. And so it had to be something that was either military or something else. But I couldn't see why military would do something so dangerous in a very, crowded airspace with, with O'Hare right there and all those airliners. You wouldn't, you wouldn't have military doing testing of aircraft in that area. It just wouldn't. It would be so negligent and dangerous. I just can't see how it could be military. So um it's something else. We don't know what it is. And so I finally came out and said, basically, it was like, I told you so. I told you there was something to this. And so that's why I'm finally coming out about it.
Well,
I mean, if I wanted to write a book, I would have written it a long time ago. If I wanted to get any kind of, my 15 minutes of fame, I would have done it a long time ago. I really wasn't, asking for this. I just want to know what it is, number one. And number two, I want people to know, especially since I have, the scientific observations on a radar, that I would think the military would be interested in knowing. And yet they've never asked me. Nobody really from a higher up level has ever asked me, what did it really look like on radar? Tell me in exact high science radar level what you saw, and nobody has asked me about that yet. And so I am going to do a science paper. I am writing it right now, to talk about in detail how the radar works and how it looked on the radar. And then I'm going to go through all the different things that it possibly could have been and say, well, it can't be this because of that, it can't be this because of that. So I've run out of things it could be, you
Yeah.
know.
Bill, what do you attribute to this seeming lack of interest from the government regarding this case, both in the immediate aftermath and even 30 years later, even after the 2022 Unsolved Mysteries episode kind of
Mhm.
brought renewed interest to the like what why aren't they expressing some sort of curiosity about this?
You, okay, so there's a couple of different things that I think you might be saying is one is why didn't they independently investigate it? And my assumption is that they have, they had access probably to all the records they needed. Anything that came out of the National Weather Service, they could just collect. The police, with through any connection within the police department, they could probably just get those reports. There weren't any photos or videos that were released, so there's that. And who knows what their own radar or their own aircraft essentially captured over Lake Michigan itself. That's not anything that they would share with us. So I think it was probably for them, to whatever degree that they were interested in this, and probably pretty interested in something of this scale, that there would be no need to show themselves. They could collect all the information they needed without ever having some sort of spokesperson anywhere revealing that that's what they were doing. And even the MUFON cases, uh, you know, it's probably, was very easy for them to collect anything out of MUFON if they wanted to discreetly, unfortunately.
But you've not heard of any witnesses that were approached by any kind of
No, not a
no.
single one.
No,
Mm.
Do you,
no, no, no.
uh, Bill,
I
I feel like
expected somebody, but no.
what's that?
I expected to
Yeah.
be contacted, but no, no.
Bill, I feel like we've talked about this before and it's worth asking this question again. I mean, what's up with Michigan? I mean, we have in 1966, we have the over Ann Arbor, I believe, a fairly large sighting. Gerald Ford, before he was president, he was congressman, I guess, even demanded further scrutiny into this. I think it was a Project Blue Book case, right? And
Mhm.
they dismissed it as swamp gas, which I
Mhm.
think really irritated Ford. So that was 66. So that was just about 28 years before this one, right? And then we have this one, and then we had Ken Ross. We've got multiple things happening. What's going on with Michigan, Bill?
Mhm. Yeah,
That's not getting very much attention either.
No.
yeah, we're more than just a Great Lakes state. We're the swamp gas state. That expression swamp gas came from J. Allen Hynek. So this was not only just a Blue Book case, they sent Hynek himself to investigate it. And during a press conference that he did to the Detroit Press Club, which is also on YouTube, you could find his press conference. He joked something like, "Yeah, like an aliens would fly so many light years to come to Earth just to land in a swamp." Maybe that is what some of people are saying. Maybe they're saying marsh gas or swamp gas, and then the press was off to the races with swamp gas. And yeah, and people then started saying, I know what I saw. And what do people do when they get upset with the government or military? They write their congressman. And so they wrote to Ford and visited Ford and called Ford. And so he had asked for an open congressional hearing on UFOs, which did happen. And then after that, it was roughly after the late 60s, it was 50 years before another open congressional hearing on UFOs, which is stunning that half a century went by since the late 60s before the next time that UFOs got this sort of political attention. Such a,
Yeah.
such a, yeah.
And I'm encourage anyone that is joining this on video and live stream, register your questions in the chat, please. I'm gonna be wrapping up with these gentlemen soon, but Jack, I don't I don't intend this to be like a Barbara Walters question, and yet I'm thinking you as a younger guy who grew up being like just sort of a fan of these weather patterns, being in love with this. and aircraft itself. You've spoken of your fondness for Michigan. It seemed like you had kind of like your perfect job at this time, this thing that
Yeah,
you love to do. And
yeah,
then this thing happens where you're reassigned,
yep,
kind of pretty officially.
yep.
And 30 years later, you're still trying to get back to Michigan. And I'm just kind of, well, I guess the first part is like, would you have rather this not happened so you, Jack, could have just continued on with this job that he loved and had led a fairly normal meteorologist life? You know, like, would you have preferred this whole incident not happen?
Actually, no, I think because I'm too curious. I'm too curious. Always been curious about. I mean, geez, I remember being 5 years old, looking at the sky, looking at the stars, wondering what's out there. Is there other things out there? And that would have been the 1970s. So yeah, but this made it real. I mean, I kept hearing, knew about UFOs, but they would say that these pictures that I would think, oh my God, that is awesome. And people would say, that's just somebody threw a disc, And so I didn't really know how real is this, but this made it real. I mean, there was no doubt, you know. There's either, first it was like, and I kept going back and forth, military, UFOs, military, or extra, or something unexplainable, non-human intelligence. Um, and and then I decided that it can't be military now. So it's really turned me into, number one, it's awesome technology, which I honestly wish it would have come out by now. If we had it, I wish we had technology that we knew about that's anti-gravitational and can alter gravitational fields. But I thought for sure, if it was something that was human made, that we would have known about it by now. It's been this long. Um, and if it wasn't, I was certain that we would have at least found life on other planets, even if it was biologic, and we haven't seen, although I think they have, they're just not saying it. I can't believe that Mars is, for instance, is completely sterile, I mean, when there's life virtually everywhere on this planet. But I really am glad that uh, I'm glad that it happened, to be honest. I still had a good career. Um, and yeah, I still had a good career, and I still finished it out really well. So everything worked out well, and now I can actually dig into it more since I'm retired, and I don't have to worry about the boss, getting on me about it or like that. So
Is there a sense of vindication? I mean, granted, we have these congressional hearings that a lot of it kind of non-answers and dancing around things,
yeah,
but it is being discussed at least at some
yeah.
level. Is
Yeah.
there some level of vindication that
Yeah,
uh
absolutely. All vindication. I mean, I still read the comments on some of the news sites when they have a UFO story. I mean, before they were talking about the government was hiding all this stuff. Now these conspiracy theorists are saying that the government is putting this out there for some, ulterior motive. So, it's like, are these the same people? I mean, I'm glad the government is finally admitting it, and I do think that they really are generally interested in it. It sounds like these congressmen really are trying to dig in and figure it out, and they are saying that it is. It's become, from what I've seen on documentaries about these Navy pilots. There was one Navy pilot said every day he went up, off his aircraft, as aircraft carrier, he said he saw things, and every single day. And so, that's a big deal, and I can't believe it's not in the media more. I really can't. I don't know why, they're still you still have that smirk on the news reporter's face when they talk about it. And I don't know why they're not taking it much more seriously. I just don't understand. It really is a national security and aircraft safety issue now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
For Bill, just a couple questions coming in. Chad did wonder, and you touched on this a little bit about Phoenix Lights, but
Mhm.
on one hand, look, we were just when this happened, we're a couple years out before having cameras, much better cameras on cell phones. But how was this phenomena similar or in other ways different from Phoenix Lights or other kind of well-known mass sighting cases?
Sure. With the Phoenix Lights, the main um, part of that evening that everyone focuses on is essentially a static set of lights that was visible from multiple angles at once. It was there long enough to be well recorded. While this event had, as Jack had said earlier, a craft that were jumping several thousands of miles an hour, skipping around the area. It would dazzle somebody and then it would be on its way. And by the time they got to their destination where they were hanging out for a while, that was out over the lake. And so I think is a matter of just the length of visibility. And the difference between them is the Phoenix lights were a formation of bright white lights, where these lights were multicolored and very clearly disc shaped once you got a good look at them. There is another element of the Phoenix lights where on the same evening, I don't know if you saw the boomerang craft that somebody had filmed. And so if you take that as authentic, and it looks authentic unless somebody can correct me on that. It had a similar chevron shape to the lights as the actual lights over the city, but it was clearly something different.
Yeah, it's that's an interesting development with this story with the Phoenix Lights story.
Yeah, and
Also,
if you don't mind, the
please.
thing about the Phoenix lights, and this was not too long after the Michigan UFOs. But if you remember, the governor came out and it made me mad when he came out with that guy in the alien suit, and that here we go again. They're not taking it seriously.
Even though he himself had
Seen it
seen
himself.
something, right?
So
Yeah,
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 Symington came out
yeah,
several years later
yeah,
as a, say
yeah,
now I can talk about it.
right.
yeah. The also for Bill from Dave and Alicia, if you had been with MUFON for a longer period of time when this had occurred, do you feel it would have affected how you looked at this incident, both then and now?
Um, no, it really stands up on its own when you compare it to other sightings. I would have realized I probably would have been a field investigator at that time. I would have gone across the state to look at it. Um, though having been I, I'm rewinding back to an earlier age. I was 22 when I joined MoveOn. So if I was there a member younger, my limited funds for being that young wouldn't have allowed me to participate more than I could much anyway. But I definitely would have made it out there, and I'm always waiting for the next big event here in Michigan. And there have been some great sightings over the years. There's no doubt some really incredible sightings, but this magnitude of a sighting, I've been waiting 30 years now for the next big one, and we're overdue.
Hmm. I mean, this
Yeah.
isn't. Go on, Jack.
Oh, I was gonna say, I remember that the sighting started somewhere. I was reading, I think it was a MUFON report, that the first sighting was somewhere around Houghton Lake, and then it just the
Mhm.
sightings just kind of boom, 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 all the way down towards the southwest. Is that actually kind of the pathway of UFO reports that you've heard I had a friend that actually was in that pathway, although it wasn't the same day, but he's a serious guy, and we went fishing sometime, and he came up after this happened, right after this happened. He said, you know, I saw, and he's not one to make something up, but he said, you know, and he didn't want me to tell anybody else, but he said, I saw this platform over my cabin, the size of a
Mm,
football field, just
mm,
hover treetop level going off towards the southwest. And that was kind of in the pathway from Houghton Lake down toward
mm,
South
mhm,
Haven. So I just kind of wonder, it was in Big Rapids, I believe. And I just kind of wonder if that's like this runway of sightings, is that, or is it just scattered all over Michigan and the Great Lakes? I mean, is there any hot spots in Michigan? I was just wondering.
mm. Yeah, not really. So Houghton Lake,
Okay.
if you're not familiar with Michigan, is fairly central in the middle of the state,
Up to the north,
and
yeah.
so then it would have been a diagonal southwest trip to get to the Grand Rapids area. Um, I would say that the one thing that you learn about the phenomena is people see it everywhere all the time.
Okay.
In Michigan, we get about 200 plus sightings a year just reported directly to us. Um, Now, there have been many months when I look at the numbers coming in. It's always California and Texas. They're always going to beat us out. But Michigan's always in the top 10 and usually towards the top. So we get a lot of sightings for for our size and our population. And the sightings come in 1 or 2 a week. That's how these 200 sightings come in, and it's persistent all year round. Sometimes there'll be 1 or 2 more around the 4th of July, understandably, but it's consistent that way, and then when you look at if you're thinking about the idea of hotspots, it's really where there are more people, you get more
Oh,
sighting reports.
right.
That
Yeah.
simple.
Okay. Wow.
So I only have two final questions for you, and I'm going to let you guys go. But you've been very generous with your time, and I
Sure, no
appreciate that.
problem. Yeah.
But the first one, I guess, Bill, I'm going to direct this to you, but Jack, I think you should respond to it as well. Where do we go from here? Because 30
Mm.
years later, this is not really a case closed, but what else can we do with this incident at this point?
Mhm. Yeah, with this particular incident, just do the best as possible to document it. I really feel that um, a, a lot of people in this field have been saying stuff like this for years. We're just about that point of disclosure. We're almost there. And you hear this again and again, year and year and year, whatever. But now I actually think we are at that point based upon the way that the military and the government are managing information around it. I think they're trying to get in front of a disclosure that they won't be able to stop. With the David Grush revelations of last year, and Congress taking them very seriously, looking into them, finding details that may be very much the case that Grush's claims are true, that we have crashed discs and bodies in the possession of the U.S. military. And, uh, I remember watching, it was an interview between Ross Coulthart and Gary Nolan, and Nolan said, "Yeah, there's whistleblowers lined up to spill the beans on projects that they worked on and things that they've seen." And I think what'll happen very soon is a group like MUFON is either going to become irrelevant because case closed, there's something coming here, or we're going to become very, very important. But I have a feeling that we're going to flip from offense to defense very soon. I think people are going to be hungry for information and looking for all sorts of places where to get it. And documenting a case like this is, I think it's going to make it to the top of the stack of what people will be very interested in because of the recordings, the transcripts around them, the police records, the National Weather Service having some records of it, pilots seeing it. I think this is a well documented case, in all those areas, the raw number of witnesses, and it remains a rock hard case that nobody can dismiss it. This isn't anything where people say, well, maybe it was balloons or something like that. No, people aren't talking like that at all. This either happened exactly how the witnesses described it, or you have 300 liars who all spontaneously made up this story that night. This is one of those types of cases that you could really bring into a court.
Yeah, the timeline is just so kind of nicely, laid out that all of these things were happening kind of at once. I don't even know how you really could have coordinated this kind of thing if you had wanted to falsify it. Although I also have to say I am somewhat surprised by part of your statement. Like I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you believe Grush?
Yes.
Interesting.
You have you seem
This is a whole follow-up conversation, Bill. Like, I want it. We'll put a pin in it and then bring you back to talk about some of this stuff. Because I don't know. I guess maybe I'm just a little too cynical, but I keep thinking that nobody knows what the hell's going on in Congress, and that they're uh, kind of putting these reports together and hearings together. But I don't know. It feels like we're getting more non-answers. Granted, there's going to be things that they're not going to say, but everybody talking about disclosure for so long, I kind of was thinking disclosure would come from the people, not from the government. I mean
Oh
that,
yeah, sure. I don't need the government or military to tell me about the reality of the
yeah,
phenomena, but their admission that something is happening would mean that resources that they have to respond to it will come into play.
okay.
That's good. Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
we'll follow up on another conversation about the other stuff, but that's a separate episode. Jack, anything else that you want to add to what Bill said? I kind
Yeah.
of set it up with like what now with this case.
Right, right. What now? Well, there are times, depending on my mood, where I think, oh, how did I get myself into this? People are gonna think I'm so nuts, and then I just wanna, and then I won't even want to watch a documentary because it always reminds me of this event. But then there are other times when just really want to know what this is, and it's driving me crazy. And so I am watching, and I learn a lot by watching other documentaries because I see some similarities in there. And it just floors me when I hear somebody else saying something that they saw that I saw exactly the same way on my radar. And so that's where I want to learn more about what they're hearing, what they're seeing, and how the radar worked, and how they picked it up. But one thing that we have to say is the way, that always comes, that I come back to, is the way we verify with real true knowledge about, for instance, a tornado going through the area, is if you see a tornado on radar and then you get somebody on the ground that says, yes, I see a tornado, that's a positive hit. They use that for verification to say, yes, there was a tornado. It's not like, well, there might have been a tornado. No, there was a tornado there. And so vice versa. If somebody sees it on the ground and says, I see a UFO there, and then I saw it on radar, same thing with it. I mean, with a tornado, if somebody saw a tornado on the ground and then I saw it on radar, it's not a maybe, it's a yes, it was there. There was a tornado there. So it's the same thing with these UFOs that, you know, saw it on the ground, saw it on the radar. If it was a tornado, we would say, yes, it was really there. And so you got to say, you take it to the UFO part. Yes, it was there. They were there. They were real.
Well, user Chris wanted to know that if you could send a message back to them, what would you
Yeah.
say?
Say thank you for visiting. Thank you for the show. How does your stuff work? Where do you come from? Have you
Hmm.
visited the Earth long? I mean, I'd have a million
Have you been
questions.
to White Castle yet? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But one thing I wonder too, and this is from watching a lot of stuff, is people say, why do they just come over here to Earth and then do this and then go, no. Do we really know that they've come here and then go back to wherever they came from? Or are they actually here and been here for thousands of years and they're just kind of doing their thing, whatever that it is? Are they really going back and forth to where they're from? If that's what the case is. Or is there something, we don't know what is it? Something like 80% of the oceans haven't been, looked at. We don't really know what's on the other side of the moon, on the far side. I'd like to really see what's up there on the moon, and I'm glad we're going back. Um, if we see something that shouldn't have belonged on the moon, are we going to find out about it? If they have anything up there, any technology or some old, equipment that didn't belong to us in the last 50 years that we've been going to the moon, is anybody going to say anything about it?
If so, I hope they come on my show and talk about
Yeah, yeah,
it.
that would be nice, right?
Bill and Jack, how can people follow you and support your work, or reach out if they have some strange stories of their own? Bill Konkolesky.
Okay. And I'll answer that question really quickly too, if I have just a second, is Chris Bledsoe, who's had a great number of uh, close encounter experiences, and he says that his message to them whenever he sees them is simply, "We're here," or "I'm here." And I think really that just sums everything up. Like, yes, we share this universe together. I see you, you see me, I'm here. And to me, I always thought that was a great starting point to any sort of conversation. And if you see a UFO, there's no better place to report it than MUFON. You could go to MUFON.com to submit your report there directly, and a field investigator will get back to you. Yes, we have people actually investigate the sightings. We are not just a receptacle of sightings, but we actually have a team that looks at these sightings. MUFON's been around since 1969, over 5,000 members in over 40 countries. We're the real deal. And if you want to investigate UFOs yourself, there's no better place to do it than MUFON. If you want to contact me about if you've had a close encounter, a contact experience, and you want to bypass MUFON and hit me up directly, my personal website is experiencer.me. And, and yeah, I have a couple books about my personal encounters, and so you can find me there. In fact, if you just remember how to spell my last name, put it into Google, my contact information is all over the place.
All right, Bill Konkolesky, State Director. I know your name, and now I can't say your name. Bill Konkolesky, State Director of the Michigan chapter of MUFON and author of the two Experiencer books. Experiencer Raised in Two Worlds is part one, so check it out. And Jack Bushong, like, if people want to say hi, reach out, follow your work if you
Sure.
put stuff out there.
Yeah, I will. I use Facebook a lot. So my email is jackbushong@gmail.com. Very easy. But I get so much spam, it's barely usable anymore. So I hardly find, I might miss messages. So if you want to, well, like most people are doing right now that I'm seeing them, is that they just send me a Facebook message and just tell me what you're writing, and I can get back to you. And I do have a lot of messages to field, but right now, but I am reading them, and then I'm trying to get back to them, and I'm trying to follow up and learn more about what people are saying. So very interesting.
Well, Jack, Bill, I'm just so appreciative of your time. This was a great conversation. Thank you for joining me sincerely. And I look forward to speaking with you both again in
Sure,
the
absolutely.
future. And in the meantime, I am Aaron Sagers, and this has been Talking Strange. And until next time, be kind, stay spooky, and keep it weird.